Hey, this is Bora from PeachWeb. In this video, I'll show you how to make the UI for Sneakerhead's website, which is fashion or hypebeast inspired website. This is going to be really easy, and let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, let's start with our static elements such as navbar and the footer. So let's go ahead and create like a parent block for both. And let's call this UI. Let's go ahead and remove every single value here. There we go. Now all we have to do is start with the navbar. To do that, let's go with a block here, place that inside, and let's rename this to navbar. But before we set the width and the height for this navbar, let's go ahead and add our elements inside. So let's go ahead and place another block, and let's add image here. For this one, I have this logo. Let's put this inside, and let's place this inside the navbar. Let's go ahead and rename this to logo, and there we go. Now let's go ahead and remove the width from this logo so we can play around with the height, so it gives us more option to play around with the size. Let's make it like 24. There we go. Let's go ahead and remove the width and the minimum height from this thing. Let's remove the paddings. There we go. Maybe we can add like a display option to center the logo just in case. And let's go ahead and create the socials or the button block here. So for that, let's go with a block and let's place a text here. Let's place this text inside the block and let's put this inside the navbar. Let's call this socials. And let's go ahead and change the color of this text so we can see it better and edit it. And let's go ahead and remove the width. Do the same step for the socials. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and change this to join us. Let's change the font. I will go with this font. And for the size, let's go make it 14. And we can keep the other values same. For the color though, let's make it like less brighter so we can play around with the opacity. 50% should be enough. And this is done. Now let's add like social icons here, such as Discord or Twitter or even OpenSea, since this is a NFT project. Let's go place a block and let's go with an image. So I have icons here, and let's start with the OpenSea. Let's place this inside the block. Let's remove the values here. Let's center this one too. And for the size, let's remove the height and maybe we can make it 100%. But for the block, we can make it 24. This should be enough. I want it to be small. So let's go ahead and call this OpenSea. And let's place this next to the text. Let's copy paste this. And let's move on to the next one, which will be Discord. Let's change the logo here. And here we go. We have the Discord. Now let's make the Twitter, or let's make this X. And let's change the logo to this. Now let's play around with the display options since this is not aligned well. So let's start with the navbar. Let's make it flex, direction horizontal, center, or even space between, align center, and there we go. Let's remove the minimum height from this thing. And let's move on to socials now. Let's change it to a flex, horizontal, center. Let's change the gap to 8 pixels. Actually, these icons are larger than I think, so I will make them 20 pixels. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and remove the bottom padding here. And maybe we can add like 24 to other axis or the offsets. And this looks good. Now let's maybe remove the padding for this one. And we are all set. And now let's set the positioning for this navbar. Let's make it fixed. And let's position it to 0 top. This should work perfectly fine. Let's move on to the footer now. So for that, we can just copy paste this and stick it to the bottom. Let's go ahead and remove the top padding here. And let's go ahead and remove this logo. We're gonna need this block. And let's call it divider. For the minimum height, let's make it 1. And for the width, let's make it 100. And for the direction, let's make it horizontal. and distribute. Let's make it start. This should work. Now let's move on to our next block. And let's call this links. And let's open it. For the text here, I will need only 2 blocks here. And let's move this text inside this block. And let's change the width here. Let's make it auto. And for the icon, let's remove the width. And maybe we can add like height to this one. But before, let's change this to this decor image that I have. And yeah, this works perfectly fine. And let's make it like 3. So it's small enough. And let's go ahead and add like padding here. And let's change the text. Now let's change the font. Let's make it this one, and let's make it white. For the size though, let's make it 16. And for the letter, let's make it minus 0.5. Or actually, let's go with minus 0.7. This should work perfectly fine. And line can be 24. Now let's change the width to this parent block. Let's make it 100%. And let's set the distribute to space between. For this right side though, let's remove this and we can copy paste this block. Let's delete the image here. But first, let's rename this to left text. And let's rename this to right text. Let's change the text here. And here we go. Our footer is now set. But there's like an issue, which is text is really close to the bottom. So we can add like padding. Let's go ahead and add like margin to this child block. Let's make it 8 and 8. And this will work perfectly fine. And here we go. This is our navbar and footer. Now let's move on to our sections now. So for that, let's go ahead and add block here. Let's remove the padding here. And maybe we can add like 24 to left and right. Let's remove the values here. And here we go. And let's also call this one section 1. Let's go ahead and add one more block inside. And let's call this wrapper. Let's go ahead and remove every single value. And now let's add text inside. Let's add like 2. Let's move this inside. And here we go. First, let's make the text white so we can see what we're working with. The first one will be our title, and second one will be our subtext. So for the main title, let's go ahead and change the text. But first, let's add like a height to this one so we can work on it better. And here we go. Let's call this sneaker hat drop, and maybe this one. Now let's play around with the size and the font options. So for the top one, I will go with this bold font that I have. And for the size, let's go with DVW, or maybe even 17.5. Nope, let's go with 17.4. And let's remove the width. Let's remove the paddings here so we can fit it. And there we go. Works perfectly fine. And for the other values, let's change the line height to 16 dVH. Or instead of dVH, let's make it dVW. And here we go. Now let's move on to the second text and let's keep the same values, but instead let's change the letter here. Let's make it the same as before, and let's change the font to this one. And let's remove the paddings for this, and let's keep the left one. And also for the positioning, let's make it relative, and let's make it minus 16 from top. Exactly. Now let's play around with the positioning here. So for the wrapper, let's make this fixed, and let's stick it to the bottom. Here we go. And let's change the display option to flex, and let's center everything basically. For this section 1, let's go ahead and remove this height, and there we go. We are basically all set. And let's change the let's move on to section 2 now. Let's copy paste this and let's hide this one. And let's rename this to section 2. Let's remove this small text or the subtext. And let's play around with our main title. Let's change the text first. And we need to change the size here. So let's make it like 5 or maybe 4. Let's change the line height to 4 or 3.5, 3.4. Yeah, this works perfectly fine. And let's align it to center. And let's create like a text span here. And for the text span, you have to select the words you want to turn into a text span and just go on to this option. So now let's change the color for this. Let's make it like white, but with like 66 or like 34 opacity. And yeah, this works perfectly fine for us. Now let's set like maximum width to our main text. So like let's make it like 1000. Let's center this. Or even like we can make it 800. Or let's make it like 750. 720, 730. Yeah, this works perfectly fine. Now let's add like a background shade to this one. For that, let's go ahead and add an image here. And we recommend you to make a background gradient in Figma or in Photoshop and export as PNG, because if you use a color and use a blur option, this will affect your performance. So we recommend this way. So I have this background gradient and let's move this down. Let's change the width to 100% and let's make it fixed as well. And for the height, let's make it like 350. Let's stick it to the bottom. But now our footer is gone. So let's add z-index to our UI wrapper. So for that, let's go turn the positioning type into relative and let's change the z-index to like maximum. And let's add z-index to this wrapper. But instead, let's move this out. I don't want it to be here. Let's add one z-index to our wrapper. And here we go. It works perfectly fine. Now, since we're done with the section 2 as well, let's move on to section 3. Let's copy paste this. Let's hide this. Let's call it section 3. And now let's remove this image and let's copy paste this wrapper. First, let's hide this one and let's work on the first title. Let's remove the span, or let's just remove the whole text and change it to join us on. And let's go ahead and add like a block and a text. Let's move this text into the block and let's move this inside this wrapper. Let's copy paste this text like 4 times, or let's take it back. Focus on one text first, and then we can change the text. And then we can change the text. For this block, let's remove the values. Let's keep the width, and let's add like display option flex vertical, and let's align it to the left. For the text, let's remove everything, and let's change the text to X. I'm gonna basically turn this into footer with socials. So for the font, let's go with this one and let's make it a bit larger. Let's remove the line height. Let's make it auto. And here we go. Now we can copy paste this. Let's copy paste it 3 times. And let's change this text to Instagram. And for this one, let's make it Discord. And for the last one, we can make it medium. And here we go. But for the positioning of this block with the small texts or the socials, we need to move it a bit to the right so it aligns better with the header and it's gonna look better. So let's change the type to relative and we can add like 24 left positioning and 8 pixel top. So this will work perfectly fine. Now let's move this main wrapper to the left as well. So like let's add 24 pixel and we can keep the bottom one. And yeah, we are set with the socials here. Now let's add like a button or CTA here. So for that, let's just make this one visible. Maybe we can delete this one and copy paste this. And let's get rid of this text. We're going to use these ones. But first, let's align it to the right so we can work on it. And yeah, let's remove the positioning values here. And let's call this collection. And maybe we can add height or paddings here so we can make it button. So for that, let's go ahead and remove the width. Let's add height of like 50 or maybe even 58. And let's center this. Let's add 24 pixel and 24 pixel to left and right. Let's go ahead and change the radius to maximum. And let's add white fill. Let's change the text color to white. And here we go. We have a button here. And let's go ahead and also add a icon here, like an arrow icon. So for that, I have this one. It's not visible because it's black. So let's move it next to this text. And let's change the size to like 40. And let's go ahead and change the direction to left and right, or the horizontal. Let's call this CTA as well. And we are done with the section 3 as well. So now let's move on to our anchors or durations. So for that, let's go ahead and add a block. And let's add one more. First, let's call this duration. And maybe we can call this anchor 1. So let's move this inside the duration. Let's remove the values here. So our anchors will be different in terms of the height because titles are different from each other. And I wanted to keep it different in terms of the time. So for that, we will have 3 anchors in total. And I want first one to be 70 dBH, second one to be 100 dBH, and third one, or the final, it needs to be higher than 100 dBH. So we can go with something like 120. So in total, it's about like 390. But since we will add absolute positioning with percentage values, we can make it like 440. So it will have 50 dBH more or 50 dBH extra. So let's go ahead and change the height to 440 and make it dBH for the anchor 1. Let's remove the width and the height. And let's add height of 70 dBH. And let's change the positioning to absolute. And let's make it 0%. Here we go. Now let's copy paste this and let's create the anchor 2. And for the anchor 2, let's change the positioning to 28%. And let's change the height to 100 dBH. And let's copy paste for anchor 3. And let's make this one like 90% from the top. And let's change the height to 120 dBH. So now let's add scroll sections. Let's make this one 1, this one 2, and this one 3. And if we go back to our sections, let's start with our section 1. Let's go ahead and add effect or scroll animation. Let's set this to section view, viewport or the section 1, viewport top. And let's make the preset fade in. And we are set with the first section. So now let's move on to our section 2. Let's do the same steps. And let's make it fade in as well. And for section 2, I will add animation to our text as well. So not only the parent wrapper or the parent block, but also the text. So let's go back to our title. Let's add scroll animation to this one. And let's do the same step. But instead, I will make this one fade in, but change the offset, Y offset, to 50 for enter and minus 50 for exit. And also I will change the transition to ease out for both. And here we go. Maybe we can change the duration to like 500. There you go. We are set with the section 2 as well. So let's move on to section 3. Let's do the same steps and let's keep it in preset. And also for section 3, I will do the same steps as section 2. But first, let's hide it. And let's move on to our wrapper. I will add animation to this title and also this block itself. So let's start with this title. It's the same steps, section and view. Section 3, top. And let's make it fade in. Let's change the enter offset to 50 again. And exit offset to -50. For the transition, let's make it ease out. And let's change the duration to 500. Now we are set with this one. Let's move on to our wrapper for the buttons. It's the same steps. Let's make it fade in. And for enter, let's do the same. 50. And let's make this one ease out. 500. And for delay, let's make it like 300. So first this one, and then this one appears. For the exit, let's do the same, but -50. Ease out, 500, and 300 delay. And we are set with the left wrapper. Let's move on to the right. So instead of the wrapper itself, let's go with the CTA. Let's add effect, section 3, and let's make it fade in and change the effects. So for the enter, let's make it 50. Transition ease out, duration 500, and delay 300. Let's do the same for exit, but instead we're gonna make it -50, ease out, 500, and for the delay, let's make it 300. And we are basically all set. Let's make these visible and let's go ahead and preview. So let's scroll down. That was our first title. This is our second. So the animation we added allows us to add this beautiful appear animation. So like it comes from the bottom and goes to top. And let's scroll down. So the last animation we added with delay causes this effect. So first this, and then these buttons. So let's check it out again. And here we go. We are basically all set. Only one thing left to do, which is basically add links to these blocks. So let's go ahead and hide the first and second and click on the text itself. Top right, you'll see a link option. Let's keep it in URL, and here I have this link, and let's make it a new tab. Let's do the same steps for others. And here we go. If we go on to preview, since the first and second one is hidden, we cannot see them. But let's scroll down. Here's our buttons. And yeah, these are working. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more tutorials coming up. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.